Our second session now. I'd like to thank the deputations for attending our hearing today. And first of all, I'd like to explain to you about the microphone that is in front of you. It's very sensitive. You don't need to close it too close to your mouth. A distance like this would do. There's also a earpiece. If you tune into channel 1, it's the floor channel. If you need to listen to the interpretation, channel 1 will be the Cantonese channel, and channel 2 is the English channel.
On every booth, so that if you put on the earpiece and tune to the channel 2, that will be the simultaneous interpretation for English. Then you could listen to the interpretation for all the Cantonese speaking on the floor.
Also like to remind the deputations present that the submissions that you are making today and your speeches will not be covered by the powers and privileges ordinance of the Legislative Council. So without further ado, I will now invite the deputations to speak. Each of you will have a limit of 3 minutes. You see a timer around this chamber, and when you start speaking, the timing would start. At the end of 3 minutes, we will invite you to wrap up and stop, so that the next deputation will also have enough time. The first to speak is Mr. Sam Wong from the Hong Kong Vegetables Trade Association. Thank you. The government is now proposing the scheme to replace diesel vehicles in order to improve air quality. Many of the trade associations are in support of this. However, the timetable for the replacement of diesel vehicles is too tight. There is a bottleneck, and we put forward a counter proposal that is the government should give us an extra another year, so that the Euro 3 model could be used for another 2 or 3 years. Euro 3 models actually are the vehicles have much less, cost much less pollution than Euro 2 models. There are 6,000 odd such Euro 3 models for our trade, in our trade. We made this proposal, and I hope members understand why there are now 80,000 second-hand vehicles which are running on the roads. It's not that they don't want to change them for new vehicles, but very often many of the operators are single vehicle owners. Many of them are in the 40s and 50s. They simply cannot retire so soon. We're talking about if 80,000 vehicles will need to be replaced, we're talking about many operators and many families to the tune of several 100,000 which will be affected. We always, tell the Environmental Bureau this point, but they always respond by giving us figures, saying there are 50,000 model Euro 4 or 5 models, but these are they are cars which are used by the owners. We're talking about cars, these 50,000 cars are still being used by the owners. With the new policy coming into place, the prices of second-hand vehicles have already gone up by 10-20% because of the speculation. Of course, we support the proposal to improve air quality, but I hope you will give us an extension of 1 year, so that you would, for Euro 3 models, give us 2 or 3 more years in order to avoid the bottleneck. You're fooling us with the figures. We know what's going to happen going forward. We don't want the trade to be affected. People in the industry need to make a living, and we don't want the public to be affected as well. I think your proposal is too crude. For Euro 4 and 5 models, there's no time limit. But if I buy a new vehicle, there's going to be a service life time limit. I think your proposal needs to be fair and impartial. I think this crude proposal means that you've not done a good job. Now, we hope that if we were to buy a new car now, you would have a consistent policy, and so long as we satisfy the standards prevailing at the time, a vehicle should be allowed to run. Thank you, Chairman. Together with 5 public bus operators associations, we jointly presented a submission earlier. we hope that the EPD will respond to the issues raised at a briefing on the 7th of October this year. The administration has not responded to those views, points, and I think those points are already covered in our written submission. Secondly, our association and the trade are in favor of the new legislation, and that it should be enacted as soon as possible. Indeed, the trade requires such a subsidy in order to provide us with the incentive to replace our old vehicles. We also support the EPD's proposal that the pre-Euro and Euro 123 models should be. I think the replacement arrangement should be adjusted so that the trade is given a bit more time for us to talk to work together with the vehicle suppliers and the vehicle bodybuilding vendors. Because the safety requirements are higher for our vehicles, so we need a good system in place before we can have vehicles that can carry our school children and for other people going to work safely. The other issue has to do with COF. Our vehicles will need to be will go through a COF inspection once every 3 years. Now, with the new Euro 4, Euro 5 models, is it possible that that the owners will not have to invest a huge amount of money, 12 to 13 years after its first registration, in order to pass the inspection, because that can help avoid unnecessary waste, because they would need to be phased out anyway at the end of the 15th year. So I hope the department can respond to this point. Next, we have Mr. Lam Hoi Tat from the Hong Kong Container Tractor Owners Association. Thank you. My name is Lam Hoi Tat. Our association basically support the present agreement which has been reached, because that agreement is the result of a long and rational discussion. Of course, there are still shortcomings in that agreement. However, the trade is still willing to make some sacrifice in order to work for the overall benefit of our society and take that first step. Of course, this arrangement will have grave impact on the the transportation and the logistics industry. With the scheme implemented, I think 20 to 30% of the operators in our industry will leave the market, and that would first of all adversely affect Hong Kong capacity as a transport and logistics hub. And furthermore, this arrangement will, I think, for the single vehicle operators, they will suffer irreversible losses. In the process, they will be eliminated because they can come back to the market, because the new vehicles would be too expensive for them to buy one and stay in the market. So this policy will result in the market being monopolized by big consortia. I think the government would need to pay attention to this. Furthermore, if I were to buy a vehicle, the most expensive model being 1 million, the cheapest $500,000, and they all both had a 15-year service life limit, I think everybody will know what the decision will be. And in the end, because of this scheme, I think that you may not be able to achieve the objective that you wish to achieve with this arrangement. Finally, the first registration tax for container lorries is still packed at 15%. I think the government will need to look at this. For other diesel vehicles like the tourist coaches, the first registration tax is not so high. If you give the owners 20% subsidizing to buy new vehicles, and then when they buy a new vehicle, they have to pay tax to the tune of 15%, so they don't really stand to gain that much. So to some extent, the government should also promote the concept of environmental protection and remind the public that the whole community will have to undertake the responsibility. That is, besides the trade, the whole community would know that protecting the environment would involve a cost. Other than this, I think for the replacement of vehicles, in future there's going to be a bottleneck. Next, we have the Kowloon Truck Merchants Association Limited, represented by Mr. Leung Kun. Thank you. Chairman, I'll be brief. I support the EPD's implementation of the scheme for the replacement of the old diesel vehicles. What we don't agree with is the disparity. We both own diesel vehicles. Why are we charged a 15% tax? Whereas for buses, they also operate a business. They also serve the public. We buy a truck. We don't serve ourselves, but rather the public. Why do we have to be charged 15% tax for the non-franchised buses and taxis? Taxis are tax-free. For non-franchised buses, the owners only charge a few percentage points of registration tax. Again, they will still get the 27 to 30% subsidy. The subsidies they pay for 4% tax to buy a new vehicle. You give us the same amount of subsidy, but for us, the lorry drivers, we have to pay 15% tax. So I'd like to ask this. Ask the government department and the IRD whether or not there is discrimination there against us. That's the most important question. And finally, just one more point. All the lorries, other than the engines, and once they're imported and after inspection they could be used. But for all the other lorries and trucks, they need to be assembled manually before they could be taken for inspection. Given the shortage of skilled, technicians, this is really a problem. So I hope the government will announce an implementation timetable as soon as possible so that we can prepare ourselves. Everyone is now waiting. The owners, the vehicle body builders, and so are all waiting for your plan to be announced so that we can make arrangement for inspection. Next, we have the Civic Exchange Master of Public Health class of 2014, Mr. Ma. Thank you. As a MA student of public health in the Chinese University, I would like the government to replace the Euro 3 and older diesel vehicles as soon as possible, because these vehicles, emit pollutants like nitrogen oxide and particulates. And nitrogen oxide would cause respiratory disease, chest pain, and even death. And suspended particulates will affect our lung functions, and extended contact will result in chronic respiratory diseases and even cancer. And these pollutants, I think for people living close to the roadside, especially for senior citizens, the effect will be even more serious. Medical studies have shown that such pollutants, especially for people whose bodily function, for children whose bodily functions are not yet fully developed, they still have a bigger chance of suffering from asthma.
And also that would also affect fetus who are not born, and their weight, they might be underweight, and they might also be premature births. And also when the RSP in air grows, then the mortality rate would also grow. And in Hong Kong, many residents live by the roadside, and where air ventilation is not good in the urban area, there will be a higher chance that they will be exposed to such traffic pollution. That's why emissions from these vehicles will have significant impact on public health. And in Hong Kong, some 40% of air pollution comes from roadside air pollution. And in 2012, because of air pollution, mortality rate that could also be translated into 3,000 premature deaths, and also economic loss incurred would exceed $39.4 billion a year. And if the administration does not phase out these vehicles early, then Hong Kong's air quality will continue to deteriorate, and that would greatly increase our healthcare spending. And therefore, I support Clean Air Network's suggestion that for public health, we should phase out pre-Euro 2, Euro 3 vehicles as soon as possible. Thank you. Next, we have the Federation of Hong Kong Transport Workers Organizations, Mr. Yu Kwok-on, Vice Chairperson. Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of the phasing out of old vehicles, we have given a lot of suggestions to the EPD and the administration. We are very pleased to learn that the EPD has taken on board some of our suggestions so that the trade does not have to suffer that much. But there is one thing that we are very concerned about, that is under the replacement scheme. If we all go for the replacement early, then there will be bunching of orders, and no single supplier will be able to take up that many orders in one go. And therefore, we hope that in enacting the legislation, the EPD can also impose this condition. That is, the owner can sign an agreement with the administration so that he can give an undertaking that by a certain time he'll be replacing his vehicle, but then in the interim he will continue to use his old vehicle because the new vehicle has yet to arrive. So there will be greater flexibility, and then there will not be this bottleneck or bunching of orders, in particular for those smaller companies with less funds. They might have to restructure their plan so that instead of having 2 vehicles, they might want to own just one, and then there would not be large number of closures, because we don't want people to lose jobs. Because after signing this agreement, then they can be given the payment right away, so long as they are able to scrap their old vehicle, or they can just use their vehicle up to the deadline. All right, the EPD can just impose a deadline, and then we will all be sticking to that deadline so that the vehicle will not be allowed to continue to run after that deadline. Then we'll be able to meet the needs of the various traders. For example, for the heavy vehicles, and also they might have to install additional spare parts and so on, so that the suppliers would not be able to hike vehicle prices when they know there is a deadline by which everybody will have to replace their vehicle. We are more than happy to work with the EPD. We are all in support of this environmental incentive scheme. We hope that for lawmakers and the EPD, you can pay more attention to this. You will have to help the trade, so that for this vehicle replacement scheme, we can streamline the whole process by minimizing the harm that can be done to the trade, because we might be getting this ex gratia payment from you, but then we might be spending a lot more than the $11.7 billion that you're going to spend. Please do pay attention to that. Next, we have World Green Organization, Mr. Angus Wong, Policy Advocacy Manager. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We are a green group, and we support the administration's proposed initiative. And for new vehicles, there is this service life limit of 15 years. And we'd like to see the scheme implemented as soon as possible. This is our only suggestion. We would like to see air quality improve. In fact, we spend a lot of time on the power plant, and in recent years, we are now focusing more on roadside air pollution. We understand that the administration has been working on this since 2007. There is this $3.2 billion replacement scheme, and also in 2009 to 12 we had this air quality study, and then in March this year we had this clean air blueprint. Well, we have been talking about a long time, since 2007, and we are talking about more than 10 years. And during this period, residents have been exposed to very poor air quality. And now we are going to have this new initiative, and we have these new AQOs, and we hope that we can implement that right away. And for this particular scheme, we will only be able to complete it by 2020. And if we delay it any further, then we are concerned about air quality. Indeed, we have been talking about this for many years, and many of us here have helped to make it work. I hope that you can implement the scheme as soon as possible. In particular, there is some room for concession. The administration has made some concessions already. For example, the amount has been increased, and you've already deferred it by another year. And if there is any further delay, then you'll not be able to meet the objective of reducing roadside air pollution, and people's health would also suffer. If you ask me, I think there are two elements that we can look at. Well, people's livelihood, that is those from the trade. That's something that we have to be concerned about. And second is about public health. Now that you've been able to increase the exposure payment, you've already extended it by a year. And if you extend it any further, then you're actually favoring the trade rather than favoring public health. And we've already come up with a scheme of $11.7 billion, and you've already extended the replacement deadline for Euro 1, Euro 2, and Euro 3 by another year. I hope that the trade will support it. I hope that we can implement it as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Next, we have the Hong Kong Trucks Merchants Association Limited. Mr. Tang Cheng Liang. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we do support the Blue Sky blueprint or the Blue Sky Action Plan. We hope that when this policy is implemented, we can implement it as soon as possible. There are a couple of points that I'd like to supplement. Well, in your announcement, you talk about pre-Euro, Euro 1, Euro 2, and Euro 3. You also talk about the replacement deadline. All right, the commencement date would be from the 1st of January 2006. Can you change it to 31st of May 2005? Because people are not clear about it. They might have thought that they still have some time to go before 2016. In fact, that's not true. You should have changed it. So instead of 2015 December the 31st or December the 31st 2016, I think that's for pre-Euro. You will have to make it clear to them, and I hope that every year you can review the situation. Is it that all the new vehicles have to be subject to this 15-year service life limit? Because for the new models, they function very well. And even for vehicles from the mainland, if they have to be scrapped after 15 years, that would also give rise to many economic problems. And for those of us who are in trucks deals, well, many other groups might have thought that, well, in a second-hand market, we are trying to up the prices by taking advantage of this. In fact, in the form that we have to fill out, it's already made very clear that for every year or every model and these subsidy scheme for pre-Euro, Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3, how much you can get under the scheme. As car owner, they would already know how much their vehicle is worth. And is there any reason why we are selling it at $50,000 and then the subsidy is $90,000, and then we will continue to sell it at $50,000? Because we simply have no way of getting those vehicles at a low price, and so there is difficulty in terms of supply and demand. So since the announcement by the EPD of this subsidy scheme, there has been no transaction whatsoever. And for new vehicles, there is also some constraint because the number is too small to meet the demand. And everybody is waiting. There are two questions that I'd like to ask. Please do consider them. Well, for the 15-year period, is that really necessary? Can we extend it? Or can there be some grace period? For example, Mr. Lai was suggesting that there can be certain standards, but then by the time when the vehicle reaches 15 years old, we might already have Euro 7, Euro 8. It's simply not possible for us to replace our vehicles with those models. Well, your time is up. And also for the FRT, can that be exempted? Sorry. To be to be fair to other speakers, my apologies to you. You have to stop now. And if members have any questions, if they put questions to you, then you will have more time to speak. Next, Hong Kong Vehicle Transportation Association, Mr. Kenneth Lee. Thank you. Well, for us, we support the government's scheme, but we are somewhat concerned because for our members, most of them are single truck operators, and many of them are already over 40, 50 years old. So if they have to replace their vehicles, they would have this pressure. They might not be eligible for any loans, and if they are just SMEs, then in terms of raising funds, they might have difficulties. So if does the administration have ways to help them? So can you give them some advice as to what they should do? Because many from our sector are very concerned. They are at the loss. Do they have to change jobs? And if they have to switch trades, then, well, they don't mind. But then, is there any way or information that can be provided to them? Can they undergo retraining or what? So that they will be able to change jobs. So can further information be given to them? And our sector is also very concerned about this. Well, very often we'll wait till the very last minute before we replace our vehicle. But then what about the supply of vehicles, for example, the truck body, and also for the examination of trucks? Well, can it be done expeditiously? Will the administration be able to examine so many vehicles in one go if we all wait till the 11 hours before we do it? Then if you're not able to make it, then does it mean that we will have to wait till our vehicles have been examined? We welcome the implementation of the initiatives, but then how are they going to be implemented? In particular, for those of us who are single truck operators, we might not have the information available. So can you help us by offering us with more information about how the scheme is going to work? Thank you. Next, Hong Kong Society of Pediatric Respirology, Dr. Alfred Tam. Yes, I'm representing this doctors group, the Hong Kong Society of Pediatric Respirology. I'd like to say that for the benefit of the health of the children, we have to do something for them. We understand that for diesel vehicles, in particular the older models, the emissions are very high, and it's one of the major causes of roadside air pollution. That's because of PM2.5 and also respiratory suspended particulates, and also nitrogen dioxide, NO2, because of the construction of our roads. Because throughout the year, we understand that very often the AQOs would be exceeded, and there have been a large number of studies looking at roadside air pollution and how it affects our health. As far as children are concerned, we understand it better now. Well, for roadside air pollution, that is for people living nearby very busy thoroughfares, and if near their homes the roadside air pollution is very serious, then it has a lot to do with the morbidity. For example, for this onset of asthma symptoms, their conditions will be hard to control, and also for the attack rate, that will be a lot higher. For PM2.5, well, there will be an increase by some 56%, and if you live within 50 meters from the roadside, then the attack rate would be 60% higher, and also for allergy and even eczema, that would also go up by some 20%. So it shows that air pollution and roadside air pollution would affect people's allergy, and they would also be overreacting to some of these allergens, and therefore that has to do with PM2.5, and also for people living within 50 meters from the roadside, that would also mean that the onset rate would be 40 to 60% higher, and also for nose allergy, that would also go up by some 37%. For children exposed to air pollution, their lungs development would also be adversely affected, and their growth rate would be somewhat slower. And even for pregnant women, their fetus growth would also be affected. Some 34% would be affected, and as a result, their fetus would not grow healthily, and they would be less than the normal size.
In the most serious cases, it would be leukemia for small children. Studies show that if you live within 50 meters of a highway, compared with those who live beyond 50 meters, you have 100% more chance of having leukemia. So I think the situation is really very serious. Thank you very much, Dr. Tam.
Madam Chair. This issue is about what we don't see. Often we don't see the roadside pollutants because the particles are too small. We don't see the impact on human health because the time frames from the lethal medical concerns are in the units of years, not days. We don't see the green API index level of low anymore, even in Taipo, which is the least polluted, when I checked EPD records of API as far back as 1990. We don't see the blue API index level of medium anymore in Central or Causeway Bay roadside stations. We don't see the many concerned citizens who couldn't be present today who support this regulation. Hence, I submit this petition on behalf of 346 residents from Hong Kong and those who are former residents who have moved to Singapore, USA, UK, Switzerland, South Africa, and the Philippines as a result of our air pollution. We don't see more research like that published this year by Dr. Hung, Professor Lee, and Miss Lee from the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department of Poly University, which demonstrated the air quality inside old school buses that are still in use today is worse than roadside air quality, both below WHO standards. 75% of those students sampled in the 12 schools in the study were exposed for prolonged periods of time to the high level of the API, as they either walked or took the school bus. Furthermore, the schools studied were not even in the denser locations of urban areas where pollution levels are much greater, so the reality of the full story is even more serious. We don't see the discussions between people, foreign as well as local talent, who decide on whether or not to live, work, or visit Hong Kong because of health concerns related to the air quality, especially the rising incidences of asthma in youth. So what do we see? Our government has the luxury of nearly $70 billion in surplus and an intelligent population that realizes that in the case of air quality, we are all in the same boat. What I wish to see is a thoughtful government that doesn't force the vehicle tradesmen to have to choose between basic financial survival and the health of their families and themselves. What I wish to see from my government is innovative problem solving, where tradesmen and residents aren't forced to choose between two basic universal human rights. What I, a resident since 1992, wish to see is no more simple handouts of surplus money. I would gladly give my 6,000 Hong Kong dollars to the SME tradesmen and drivers so that their transition to use cleaner vehicles happens sooner rather than later. As the regulation stands, the public needs to wait for 6 more years for safer air. With Hong Kong's economy being service-heavy, we need to remember that sick employees don't work and dead consumers don't buy. What I wish to see is a visionary administration so that Hong Kong can truly call itself Asia's world city.
Thank you, Ms. Safaya.
Thank you, Ms. Safaya. We've not invited the Bureau and the officials to give a global response. Perhaps this is the time for them to do that. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank members for giving us this opportunity to scrutinize the new regulation together with you. We've come to now to a very, very crucial stage. The government is really determined to improve air quality and to safeguard the public health. During the discussion of the previous session and this session as well, many medical experts and professors, as well as the green groups, have give you an analysis of the objective facts regarding pollution, especially the emissions from diesel vehicles. They do pose a serious threat to public health. WHO announced last month that air pollution has been confirmed to be a carcinogen, so we can no longer afford to wait any further. The government in its policy address, the government in its policy address this year announced that it will help owners of Euro 3 and 80,000 pre-Euro commercial diesel vehicles to be phased out in stages. We propose a timetable and also a subsidy scheme. We understand many of our friends in the trade, if they have the choice, they don't want vehicles to be replaced. It's a question of livelihood and a question of cost. But over our discussion during the last year, we're grateful to our friends from the industry. We're also grateful to the assistance provided by electrical members to help us do the lobbying so that we were able to arrive at a consensus with our friends in the transportation industry. That is, if we could come up with a feasible timetable and the extra payment is a reasonable amount, the trade then is willing to, for the sake of having clean air for Hong Kong, they are willing to take this step forward. So we need the public, the government, and the trade to jointly, shoulder this responsibility. With the support of all the stakeholders, we hope that we will be able to have this regulation endorsed next month, so that by January next year, we will go to the Finance Committee for funding for the extra payment scheme so that we can carry out the scheme as soon as possible. On this, we've discussed the question of air quality and the vehicle replacement for many years. We've talked about the voluntary replacement, and now we're talking about mandatory replacement scheme. Now that we now have a consensus, I hope we'll be able to implement these proposals after the scheme is launched officially next month, early next month, so that our friends from the industry can take the old vehicles, surrender the old vehicles, and get the extra payment to buy a new vehicle. That will help the operators. It will help tackle the problem of roadside pollution. It can also, in January next month, we will launch a new air quality index. The scheme to eliminate old diesel vehicles can help us achieve the new air quality index in the long term. It's a very important step, and I hope that members and our friends from the industry will support that. Thank you. 3 members have put up their hands, 4, myself included. Again, I'll give 4 minutes to each member. They are Mr. Leung Kai-chiu, Mr. Pan Chiu-ping, Mr. Yip Chee-ming, and Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Mr. Kenneth Chan, thank you. Many of our friends from the deputations talk about the first registration, the 15% first registration tax for commercial diesel vehicles. So I'd like to ask the Bureau this. This first registration tax is not under the purview of the Environmental Bureau. Yeah, you're right, Mr. Leung. It's not within our purview. That's correct. Of course, I hope that this regulation will be implemented as soon as possible, and I also hope that the public in Hong Kong will be able to breathe in clean air. Madam Chair, we don't know how much our surplus is going to be this year. Of course, the AFS always told us that there will be a deficit, and that by March or April, we may be getting $60, $70 billion of surplus. Nobody can predict that. The AFS indeed can, in its budget, reserve some room so that we can further increase the incentive for the owners to replace the vehicles. Let's say, for example, under the current scheme for people who replace the diesel vehicles, the AFS can consider reducing partly or entirely the first registration tax in order to first help the trade, depending, of course, the state of our financial situation next year. If the FS were to do this, it's not for the Bureau to do anything, but for the FS, right? Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your suggestion. For this piece of legislation, it mainly deals with 2 things. First of all, for Euro 3 and pre-Euro 3 model diesel vehicles, we're talking about timetable for their replacement, and also from January 1st next year, we're talking about a 15-year service life limit for newly registered vehicles. All issues relating to taxes and extra payment is not within the scope of this regulation. Madam Chair, I think last time I mentioned this, and other deputations have also mentioned that for Euro 4 and Euro 5 models which are registered before the deadline, it would appear there's going to be a legislative gap. I've not joined the panel for a long time, but reading the regulation already notices gap. So the government, I think, must find a way to resolve this problem. Otherwise, for those who bought Euro 4, Euro 5 vehicles, it's not fair to them. As to how we can resolve that, and now we can discuss that certainly, but I don't think you can bury your head in the sand and say there's nothing, there's no problem, and we'll wait. We'll just wait and see what happens. Would you like any response from Mr. Lai? Well, I think Mr. Lai will probably say the same thing, but anyway, do your best to respond if you can. Thank you. We're already, implementing a very, very, very difficult scheme. Already the scheme covered 80,000 vehicles. So the focus this time is to deal with the most polluting vehicles first. Well, there's still 40,000 of Euro 5, Euro 4, Euro 5 models which will not be phased out according to this regulation. If later on members have any further views about such vehicles, we can certainly, after the present scheme has been successfully launched, to explore whether we need to deal with the remaining diesel vehicles. So you're not saying that you won't do it, but you are telling us you won't do it for the time being. I'm sure our society will not accept that if you say you won't do anything about it. Mr. Pun Siu Ping, thank you. The deputations for this session more or less made the same points as those in the last session. They are also in support of the government's proposal. However, there's still some issues for the government to address. One point I'd like to make is this. The representative, Mr. Yu, from the Transport Industry Alliance, referred to this contract agreement. He's worried that the peak for the replacement of such vehicles may create a bottleneck. So I'd like to ask, I'd like to know what the government's response to that is. With the agreement in place, how can you ensure that the vehicle prices will not be pushed up and so on? And secondly, some deputation made this point, and if I look at the regulation, we're told that the date is January 1st, 2016. Could we change that to 31st December 2015 instead? So what's the government's view on this idea? Someone also mentioned the 15% tax for first registration tax for lorries, although it's not within the jurisdiction of the EPD. But I'm sure the government department I think they should relay such concerns to the relevant departments, and where the government has the means, it should do something in respect of the first registration tax and the extra payments so that you can help the operators in the trade. Thank you, Mr. Pun. You asked 3 questions. 2 deputations talk about the timetable for the registration of diesel vehicles. I think this is a good suggestion. Take pre-Euro models, for example. According to this regulation, starting from January 1st, 2016, the TD will no longer license pre-Euro models. In other words, for the pre-Euro models, the deadline for renewal or registration is the 31st of December 2015. So to help you better understand, why don't we focus on this? That is, for pre-Euro models, please, would the owners please, they will need to replace the vehicle, by December 31st, 2015. We shouldn't give them the false impression that come 2016, because their vehicles will no longer be allowed to be running on the road in 2016. So I'd like the gentleman for that suggestion. Secondly, about the ex gratia payment. One deputation asked whether or not the operator could be paid the lump sum first, and then they'll give it a leeway to replace the vehicle before the deadline. I think it's difficult for us to consider this suggestion. I think if we look at the proposed replacement scheme, although we have 3 categories of vehicles. For vehicles which are less than 13 years old, they get a 33% subsidy equal to 33% of the vehicle price. And but if they replace the vehicle earlier, they stand a chance of getting a larger amount of allowance. So the intention is to give the incentive for them to replace the vehicles earlier. If we allow the owner to collect the payment first and only replace the vehicle on the date of deadline, that would be contrary to our goal of encouraging them to replace the vehicles earlier.
Another point that is even more important. Yes, we understand that taking pre-Euro vehicles as an example. All right, the deadline is the 31st of December 2015, so it's about 2 years from now. And if all owners wait till December 2015 to replace their vehicles, obviously that's not going to work. No assembler or supplier will be able to do that. So looking at the situation, they should replace their vehicles early. They should not just be replacing their vehicles very close to the deadline. So how about the sector responsible for assembly of the vehicles? Can you announce the figures to them? How many vehicles have been assembled and how many are pending, so that we can have an idea as to when we should be doing that? We will not be waiting till the last 2 weeks before we replace our vehicles. So if we can have some statistic to go by, I think that would be better. Mr. Frankie Yik. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just now, Kenneth has already asked this question. I'd like to answer the question raised by Mr. Leung Kan-kun about whether the FRT will be charged. I think it has nothing to do with the Environment Bureau. I'll be passing on your question to the FS, so we can all ask the FS about this. And also for the second batch of deputations, the message that they have expressed is basically the same as that are from the first batch. So they basically support it, and they hope that it can be implemented as soon as possible. But some are concerned that because of operational difficulties, when they try to replace their vehicles, if they want to buy a second-hand vehicle, there might not be adequate supply in the market. I can see that Mr. Tong Ching Leung is here. You are a second-hand car dealer. So have you consulted the trade? That was a question that I put to the administration. And during the next few years, will there be many second-hand Euro 5, Euro 6 vehicles that can be imported into Hong Kong? Because for the 80,000 vehicles, they will be doing that in stages, and not all of them will be buying second-hand vehicles. So is it that the demand will be so great that definitely there will be a short supply? I'd like to know more about this. And also, if they are not able to beat the deadline in replacing their vehicles, is there some flexibility? Can there be grace periods? All right, if I can show that I've already placed my order, but then the problem is with the assembly of the vehicle. If they are not able to supply the vehicle in time, then it's not my fault. And so long as I can come up with the proof, then is it okay? And Mr. Lee was also concerned that some individual operators might have to close their business and they might lose their jobs. And I can see what I can help, because the sector has been telling me that they have difficulties in recruiting people. So there are many vacancies, but nobody to fill those vacancies. So if they have this unemployment problem, just let me know. I can help. Yes, Mr. Lai. Just now, Mr. Yik said that in special circumstances, if the owner has already placed an order for the supply of a vehicle, but then if before the deadline the vehicle has yet to be delivered, then is there any flexibility? In fact, we do have this discretionary power in the legislation, and of course it's for the department to exercise, and we will have to do that very carefully. We don't want people to abuse it. All right, if there are some unforeseen circumstances resulting in the delay in the registration of a new vehicle, then we can deal with that flexibly. But then what I'm trying to say is, please do not think that we have this exemption clause available so that then if the vehicle cannot come within a week or two, then it's okay. So when we exercise that discretion, we will also have to be very careful about it. Next, Mr. Tong, can you tell us more about the supply of used vehicles? The reason why I suggested that for the December the 31st, 2015, that should also be one of the deadlines, because many people would have thought that there is still there are 3 more years to go before the replacement or the phasing out of pre-Euro 1, because we are actually coming up to 2014. Actually, you only have 2 years to go before the deadline, and if you are calculating how a heavy vehicle is manufactured, well, at least it takes 4 months for the placement of an order for Euro models, and even for Japanese cars, it takes at least 2 months, and then for the assembly, the whole process would take at least 7 months. So when you place an order for a new vehicle, it will take about 7 months for it to be delivered. And starting from 2014, even if you place the order in the early part of the year, then you will only be able to get it by the end of the year. Do I have more time? I think your answer is very important, so I'll give you 1 more minute. All right, you will have to place the order before 2014, and it depends on how many people have placed order, and would that be more than 10,000 vehicles? In fact, I'm sure the assembly line will not be able to cope if there are more than 10,000 vehicles being ordered. I think they are most concerned about passenger vehicles and also passenger cargo vans. All right, there should be no difficulty for this. But then for small heavy vehicles, all right, the assembly time would be somewhat shorter, so it would take about 3 or 4 months. It should be okay. In other words, if they have a pre-Euro vehicle which has to be replaced before the 31st of December 2015, if they have to have the new vehicle delivered, then they will have to do it by June 2014. That would be the latest, and then there will be a higher chance that he'll be able to get his vehicle before the deadline. For different models, can you tell us the number of vehicles available and also the information provided by the trade? Can you give us a chronology of events so that members will have a clear idea as to whether or not this is reasonable? And also in your APIs, I'm sure you will have to tell them the milestone dates very carefully. Or else if they just bunch up and wait till the last minute, then for technical reasons, their operations will be affected because there might be a gap, and during that period they won't be able to do any business at all. So in your publicity, you will have to make sure that that message is sent out very clearly to the trade. Yes, I think in the consultation period, the trade has already made it clear. For different models, they will have to know exactly when they will have to put in the application, because if they wait till the very last minute, then they will not be able to beat the deadline. That's why, as you just said, for different models, we will have to make it clear as to what they have to do by a certain date, so that they can have a very clear idea as to when they have to do what. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said during the first round, well, during the legislative period, for Euro 4, Euro 5, how are they going to be dealt with? Yes, we don't want to make things difficult. We don't want to defer the whole policy. But then at least in the future, you will have to come back to the FC again for funding. You will have to give us an account as to what your view is. You will have to put that in writing. You will have to make clear that we have this concern, or else people will think that the administration is giving them this way out. And then for the car dealers, they will say that, well, they will be upping the prices, and then the second-hand vehicles will be more expensive than the first-hand vehicles, because they have been misled into believing that they will be able to use them forever, because there is no service life limit on the newly procured vehicles. And also, we do not have representatives representing the garage trade. All right, whether it's 15 years or 20 years for the service life limit, I think good repair and servicing is very important. So during the discussion and negotiation process, you should have been aware of that. So what have you done so far? According to your assessment, how many people are working in the repair industry? And do they have the capability of repairing and servicing vehicles that are pre-Euro or Euro 1 to 3? And there might be a chance that they might be losing out in the process. So have you done any assessment? Yes. We are very concerned about the issue of repair and maintenance, and we have been talking to the suppliers of these vehicles, we have asked them to disclose the information about car repair and so on. Well, they've promised to do that, but then they have yet to disclose it. That's why we've been talking to the VTC. We would like to work hand in hand with the VTC so that for vehicle suppliers, they can be ready behind us so that they can offer some courses for the truck operators, because what we are most concerned about is for the newer models, say Euro 5, they might not have had enough information about how they can be repaired and serviced, and therefore if the VTC can approach the vehicle dealers and if something can be done about it, that would also help the trade. And also the VTC, starting before the end of this year, would be offering vehicle repair information center, and they'll be commissioning that center. So from the center, there can be information for the trade, and that's to support them. I hope that would help. But then, as I said, it's about liaising or working closely with the stakeholders, including the trade and the VTC, in offering these courses. Well, I understand that there are a lot of statistics, because since several years ago you've introduced this registration system. So do you know how many of them are just doing repair and servicing of diesel vehicles, and how many operators will be affected? Well, specific figures, well, they are not with me now, but then we have talked to some of the associations. They are smaller associations which are responsible for repairing and servicing these vehicles, and they are also concerned that with the supply of such a large number of such vehicles, will they be able to cope? So we'll be working hand in hand with these chambers of commerce. We are not just offering these jobs to their members. For example, for the information and the training courses, they are open to all those working in the garage trade. But then for the chambers of commerce, yes, they do have members engaging in such tasks, and therefore if we are able to do that through them, that would be more effective. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for coming to the public hearing. Thank you again for coming, and you may now leave. Thank you. Okay, we haven't finished yet. We are still continuing with our discussion. With regard to the issues that we raised at our meeting held on the 14th of November, the administration has given us a paper, and that's in paper CB bracket 1379 bracket 01. In fact, we have 15 minutes to go, and it should be sufficient time for the administration to walk us through this paper. So Mr. Lai or Mr. Mok, can you explain the details to us? Thank you, Chairman. Well, yesterday, we issued a paper to members of the subcommittee. Mainly, we'd like to respond to the 5 points raised at the last meeting. Let me quickly go through the reply. First of all, with regard to the ex gratia payment and how we can provide an incentive for the owners to replace their vehicles, well, earlier on at the EA panel, we provided a paper to explain that in setting the amounts for the ex gratia payment, it does not have any link with a particular model. So it has to do with the age of the vehicle. That's why for the three deadlines, for the three models, for Euro 3 models, if they don't wait till the deadline, that is if they can replace earlier, then the ex gratia payment can be higher. It can be up to 33% of the price of the vehicle. So basically it depends on the model of the vehicle, and if they are younger, then basically the rate payment will be somewhat larger. I think by now we are all very familiar with such information, but then just now some of the deputations also talk about the impression that the public have, that is for the 31st of December 2015 and the 1st of January 2016. I think there might be this misunderstanding, because on the 1st of January you're not working anyway, so there is no way that you can allow them to apply for that on the 1st of January. So in your API, why don't you just use the 31st of December 2015 as the deadline when you explain to the trade? Second is about mechanism and criteria for granting exemptions from compliance with the regulation. Well, on the exemption mechanism and criteria, all right, we hope that starting from the 2nd of January next year, when the new law comes into effect, well, after a vehicle reaches 15 years, there will be no renewal of the license by the Transport Department. But then if the owner can provide sufficient proof in terms of documentation, if he can prove that for the second-hand vehicle that has been in use for 15 years and the emission level is the same or even is up to the prevailing standard, let's say if it's Euro 7, then through exercising our discretion, we can allow the Transport Department to help these owners whose vehicles have exceeded 15 years of age to continue to use them. So these are basically very exceptional circumstances.
Advisor? Well, in the response to my letter, well, this application for exemption will need to be has to be stipulated through administrative procedure, and it's not mentioned in the regulations. But are the truck owners aware of this procedure? I know you don't have a crystal ball as to what would happen in 15 years from now and what the emission standards or the advancement in technology will be 15 years from now. But is there any way you can, put it in a clearer manner? I think we can liaise with the Transport Department because they need to go to the TD when they renew their license. If the owner wants the TD when the car has been running for more than 15 years and the owner wants the cars to continue to be licensed, then we can, together with the TD, let the interested owners know about the mechanism for extension. If need be, we can also put on the website of the TD and our website about the procedure for exemption applications. Mr. Chiming, I'm not too worried about this point. If by then we're going to have Euro 8 models and I'm driving a Euro 6 model, there will be new facilities in place like the SCR and so on that can help me achieve the Euro 8 model. Or if I could find a second-hand engine that could be retrofitted into the old vehicle and meet the Euro 8 standard. I mean, such information will freely, flow in the market. So I'm not too worried. So perhaps by then we may be able to actually, break up water into nitrogen, but we don't know, into hydrogen. But so we don't have a crystal ball. We know the regulations will be then, but I think we should at least do so by way of a legislative enactment rather than an administrative procedure. Some members already asked whether or not Euro 4, Euro 5 can be used forever if they were registered before January 1st, 2014. So I think we need to put a record that I have this concern. Para C, it's about the non-franchise buses and the arrangement for their inspection. We're here talking about the tourist coaches, and some deputations said that according to the requirements of the TD for the non-franchise buses, after they've been used for 12 years, they will need to go through a major inspection, which is very meticulous. The entire chassis will need to be inspected by the Transport Department. Our friends from the transport industry have reflected to ourselves and the TD that in recent years, many of these are non-franchise buses and tourist coaches. The quality of their vehicles have gone up a lot already. Furthermore, in future, if we're going to have this 15-year service life limit, so do we need to have this, meticulous inspection on the 13th year? The TD's reaction is very positive. They think that there is room here for them to streamline the procedure for the major inspection. And they've come up with a preliminary plan. That is, perhaps the vehicle will not need to undergo, will need to be disassembled. They will only look at a few crucial areas, whether the chassis has become rusted. If there's no rust, then there's no need to go on to further tests, unless there is a suspicion, which will warrant further inspection. So they will have a two-step approach for the inspection. I understand that the friends from the transport industry also find that this is an improvement. And our colleagues from the TD have told us that the streamlined arrangement can be implemented by early next year, as soon as possible, to tie in with our new regime. Mr. Yik, I really support this arrangement. I already put forward this proposal at the early stage to the Bureau. Well, we need to protect the environment. If we don't amend the regulation, and the regulation will need to be disassembled after 13 years, the scrapping of the vehicles will also cause pollution. So I agree that there should, with the proposal, that there should be a preliminary inspection before we go on for a major inspection. Well, you said you've already talked to the TD, and the TD's response is very positive. So when will you be able to announce the details of the arrangement to the trade? Because we now know, but the trade is also very concerned about this issue. Over the last 2 or 3 months, we have always been in touch with the TD and the trade, and we've talked to the association operating non-franchise buses about this proposal. So they are fully aware that the TD will be adopting this arrangement. Perhaps we can liaise with the TD again to see how they can disseminate the information in a more detailed manner to the operators of the non-franchise buses. Could the Bureau consider having the two coming into effect at the same time? That is January 1st next year. Because right now there are some vehicles which will have run for almost 13 years, and if they were to be inspected next year and a year later on they have to scrap the vehicle, it's not worth the effort. Well, the preliminary view of the TD is that early next year they will adopt the streamlined arrangement. As for the exact date of commencement, we certainly come back to members after we've talked to the TD. Could the administration clarify about the streamlined inspection procedure? Is this only an administrative procedure that doesn't need to warrant an amendment of regulation? So this has no direct bearing on the regulation itself. Beg your pardon, Madam Chair. I also like to further clarify this point. Although it's not related to this regulation, but according to ordinance, after 13 years, the vehicle would need to be go through a major overhaul for inspection. Let me try to answer the question. Members are concerned as to how the inspection will be conducted. Well, according to the TD, this is a technical issue. It's not part of a legislation. So if they want to make any changes, we're only talking about technical matters here. There's no need to amend the legislation. Let's say they will only inspect a few crucial parts instead of disassembling every part of the vehicle. I believe our principle is that if it is within the legislation, then please do not make any changes through administrative means. Anything further from you, legal advisor? Next, we come to Section B, the SME Loan Guarantee Fund. I think there is also an annex to this. Yes, Madam Chair. In response to members' request, we've looked at a different loan scheme by the government, especially the SME loan guarantee scheme under the Trade Department, which can actually help the logistics industry, which are affected by the replacement scheme. Well, they are and they are eligible to apply for a loan pursuant to this scheme. Before Mr. Yik asks his question, I'd like to remind members that we're scheduled to finish at 5. But this paper, I think we're already up to para D and E, so I'd like to consult with members whether we may extend the meeting for 15 meetings. Hopefully we'll be able to finish our discussion of this paper. And our next meeting is scheduled on the 28th of November at 4:30 this Thursday, and at which time we'll come back for the clause by clause. So shall we extend our meeting for 15 minutes? Mr. Yek. Thank you. Well, the Bureau already told us that the SME loan guarantee scheme will also cover the logistics company, but the deputations told us that for the family type of operations where the owner only operate a vehicle and which carry vegetables and so on to the markets, is there any chance that they will also be covered by the scheme? Because they may be forced to buy a new vehicle, but they can't afford it. So what's going to happen to them? Do they have to close their business? So if you could also extend the coverage to these operators, it would really help them. Thank you. I think the SME Loan Guarantee Fund, the target would be companies, SMEs. So if it's a logistics company, and the purpose of the scheme is to help the SME. The big corporations, on the other hand, will not qualify. If it's an SME only one or two vehicles, I look at understanding they're eligible to apply for a loan. Instead, if they're not a company, it's a family business, then honestly, they cannot benefit from this scheme. Understood? So by single operator, they may not be called a logistics company, but they're also an SME. So if they change the name, originally they called Chan's Grocery, they now change the name to Chan's Logistics Company, then they will be eligible. Well, we can certainly find out from the Trade Industry Department. Our understanding is that we'll look at the nature of the business the company is engaged in, rather than requiring the name of the company to fit into a certain category. The principle is that it should be a Hong Kong registered company. If that's the case, they will be eligible, rather than someone could join the scheme in a personal capacity. Perhaps you can confirm with the T&D department and come back to members later. What about the single lorry owner? And can they also register themselves as a company? Do they have to be registered as a company before they will be eligible? Of course, I've not conducted a survey here, but I believe most of them are operating in the name of companies, except they only own a single vehicle. That's all. Chairman, according to the T&I department, the SME loan guarantee scheme is very lenient. It requires a company which is registered in Hong Kong, and these companies must have substantive business operations. For shell companies, which are used for property speculation without any business activity, of course, they would not qualify. I'm sure if the applicant were indeed engaged in logistics business, and they can provide the evidence, then they would be able to qualify to apply for the loan. The threshold is certainly not very high. Next, the last paragraph, paragraph E. That is the prosecution figures involving vehicles which fail to meet the target. Last time, members expressed a concern, the fact that commercial vehicles will need to be inspected every year. After the inspection, if they are found to be in breach of the emission standard, are there a big number of these vehicles? Looking at the figures, they're certainly not very large. We have the smoke inspection scheme. For the first 10 months of this year, we've actually prosecuted 200-odd vehicles, 12 compared with 120,000-odd commercial vehicles. I think that number is relatively small. I think the member who asked this question was myself. The vehicles emitting smoke that I see on the street, I think the number of such vehicles do not. I really doubt whether or not they tally with the figures you give us here. Members can actually register themselves to help, report on these vehicles which emit smoke. So I hope you will publicize this scheme so that you can step up the enforcement. Otherwise, you've spent $11 billion, you've enacted legislation, but after all the efforts, you still find vehicles emitting smoke on the streets, then it would be a waste of money. So, are there any further questions on this paper, members? If not, we may adjourn here, and we will go to the clause by clause on the 28th of this month, namely Saturday this week. Thank you.